A little bit later this morning, I'm going to talk to you some about establishing a regular daily practice and give you some tips on that. But in addition to a daily practice, which is very, very important, something else that in the community where I live that we do regularly is to observe Uposatha Day. Are any of you familiar with Uposatha Day? Or perhaps you may know it by a different name. But in the time of the Buddha, under the Buddha's instructions, the custom was adopted that on each quarter of the moon, which is once a week, of course, in a lunar cycle, approximately once a week, that the bhikkhus would make themselves available to teach lay people, but lay people would join the bhikkhus, and for a day and a night, they would live for a day and a night each week. They would live for that period dedicated fully to practice. And so what we do now, where I live, is one day each week we set aside, and people join me, and we do some Dharma teaching. But the main thing we do is meditation and study. On one day a week you can do, maybe instead of sitting once a day, sit 3 or 4 times and do some Dharma study. And of course, in the original tradition of Uposatha Day, it was based on the lunar cycle, so it didn't fall on the same day every week. But we're doing this on Sunday because, of course, in Western society, that is the traditional Sabbath day that has been observed by most people in the society. So it works out, and it's very convenient. And so it is something that I would encourage you to consider for yourselves, that you set aside one day a week that you would devote more or less entirely to your spiritual practices of meditation and study. In many countries in Southeast Asia, the tradition has been continued, and lay people will go to a monastery or the temple, and they will hear teachings and they will meditate. And I think this is a very valuable and wonderful tradition, and it's well worth reestablishing it or preserving it and continuing it. But since this is the day that we are accustomed to observing as Uposatha Day, I'm going to ask you to join me in the simple things that we do. What I would like you to do, I'm going to recite homage to the Buddha and the refuges, and I'll do that in Pali. If there's anyone who feels comfortable repeating the Pali refuges after me or the homage, please feel free to do so. But otherwise, allow me to do that. And then afterwards, we'll sit together in meditation, and then we'll begin to have our talk. Okay? So, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi. Dhammam saranam gacchāmi. Sangham saranang gacchami, dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, tatyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, tatyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. This completes the going for the 3 refuges. So please join me and we'll sit. Okay, and make yourselves comfortable. We'll do a slightly longer meditation than we have been the last couple of days. So make yourself comfortable, settle in. Take a deep breath and relax. Think about how fortunate you are to be here in this place at this time. You have the opportunity to study and practice the Dharma. Well fed. We're very fortunate in the circumstances that we live in. And here you are, sitting in this place, your body relaxed and comfortable. And here is a little prayer, a mandala prayer, to remind us of the wonder of this world that we are a part of. Here is the great earth, filled with the smell of incense, covered with a blanket of flowers. The great mountain of 4 continents, wearing the jewel of the sun and the moon. In my mind, I make of them a paradise of the Buddha. And I offer it to you all, sentient beings everywhere. By this deed, may all beings come to know the pure world, free from suffering. And now, with a sense of joy and happiness in your heart, bring your attention to the tip of your nose and begin your meditation. I won't guide you, but I'll signal you when the time is ended. What I've tried to do so far, and I hope I've been successful to some degree, is to help you understand a little better the nature of your mind and how it works, and in doing so to unlock the secrets of how you, by a fairly simple, systematic training of your mind, you can achieve the highest meditative state in a relatively short period of time. So, but, and also when we first began, I told you that this was something that it was very attainable, not something that would take you a huge amount of time or lifetimes to accomplish. And I also said the fruits of this practice were very attainable in this lifetime for every single person in this room. They're not something that's hugely out of reach but on the other hand, to be successful in this meditation practice and to realize the fruits of the practice, it does take an effort, a sustained effort. Consistency and diligence are absolutely required. I don't know, maybe it has happened, but I don't think that anybody has ever become enlightened or awakened as a result of saying, I think I'll dabble in meditation in my spare time, along with golf and socializing and watching TV. It doesn't happen that way, I don't think. Maybe it does for somebody, but I've never heard it anybody. What seems to be more the pattern is that a person begins to develop this strong motivation, and practice becomes important to them and a priority. And over time, it becomes the most important thing. And their whole life becomes Dharma practice. I've seen that happen, and I've seen that it succeeds. But I've seen that people who don't start out making this a priority, that it doesn't happen with them. So you have to take these first steps. You have to take the conviction that this is something that you really want to pursue from deep within your heart and act on that in the very first steps to make it a priority in your life. The very first thing is that you have to establish a regular practice. And it doesn't work to say, well, I'll practice meditation every day whenever I get around to it. Some of you may have tried that. And what happens in these busy lives that we lead, we don't get around to it. Well, actually, for the first little while, you're really good. You're excited about it. Yeah. You get around to it. Then something comes up and, well, missed that day, but that won't happen again. But a couple of days later, it does happen. And then after a while, your practice falls apart. There's only so many hours in a day. And we're all busy. We all have a lot of demands on our time and our energy. And so, unless you give it its due importance within the context of everything else, all of these other things that are competing for your time and energy are going to win out. It's like you get a job. It's a job you want, you like. Well, you do what's necessary to make sure that you get there on time and that you have the energy to do the job properly and so forth. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So, if you haven't already established a regular practice in your life, the things that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to look at the routine of your daily activities, of your regular activities. And making practice a priority, you're going to have to decide where it fits in. And almost certainly it means you're going to have to make changes, and you're quite likely going to have to sacrifice something else to make sure that you can do this consistently and regularly. So you really do, it's not something you just sort of slip in amongst everything else, because there is Certainly in the beginning of practice, there's a certain resistance that develops. And when there are other things competing for your time, it's very easy to procrastinate. So you need to decide when you're going to meditate, where you're going to meditate, create the conditions, make the adjustments in your life. And now, probably for most of you, the best way to do that is you're going to pick a period in the day according to clock time and say, this is when I practice. Some of you may not be so clock oriented, but you'll have some kind of routine. So the same thing. You'll say, within the routine of my day, this is when I meditate. When you do that, just to give you some tips, for the vast majority of people, the best time of day for them to meditate is in the morning. Not too long after they wake up, and usually before you've had breakfast, or at least not eaten a large breakfast, maybe a piece of fruit and some tea or something like that. But that's, for most people, that's the time of day that is most conducive. You're very well rested. You haven't had a lot of things happen to agitate your mind. And also in terms of fitting it into your schedule, finding the time for it, especially if you work and you have family and things like that, you will probably find that the easiest place during the day to make a slot to meditate is by getting up a little earlier. But that may not be true for all of you. But for most of you, though, the best time of day is early morning, not too long after you've woken up. And by contrast, for most people, the worst time of the day is the middle of the afternoon. That's when I had you meditating the last couple of days, huh? Well, sometimes it happens in terms of other considerations, that it may turn out that that's the only time that you can do it. And if it is, it's not impossible. It's just that physiologically we all seem to hit a low energy, a low point in our daily energy cycle in the middle of the afternoon. And so that can make it a little more difficult, But it doesn't mean that it's impossible. But it's just if you are like most people, there is a best time and a poorest time of the day, and then there's all of the other times which have their pros and cons. Some people are very good at disengaging, from their day's activities when the time to work has ended and they go home. They're very good at just leaving all that behind. And so that time's a very good time for them to meditate. Other people, though, it's not so easy, and they spent the whole day accumulating a lot of agitation and disturbance of the mind, and so that's all there. It's something for you to take into consideration, but it's also, as long as you have the options to select one time or another, and you can look at your own tendencies, make some kind of judgment based on that. But it's even that if you have to meditate, if the only time that really works for you to meditate is after you get home from work in the early evening and you do have a lot of agitation in your mind, that's all right. It just means that you'll very quickly get a lot of opportunity to practice dealing with agitation. Just like if the only time that you can meditate is right after lunch, you'll get a lot of opportunity to practice dealing with dullness. And both of these are a good thing. Once you've succeeded in dealing with them and mastered them as problems, it'll be done with forever. And of course, the longer you practice, the more versatile you'll be. More and more, any time of day will work just as well. And more, any kind of circumstance will work just as well. But I suggest you look at your day and you decide when is the best time. And then you do whatever you need to do to make sure that you can always do that. Let people know, I'm not available at that time. No calls, no appointments, I'm not available. I'm doing something else. Which would be the case with other sorts of things, If your job entailed doing something and you were not available a certain part of the day, you would quickly let everyone else know that. And it's the same thing with meditation. Let people know you're not available then. And then a suitable place. And it doesn't need to be completely silent. It doesn't need to be dark. You just do the best that you can, to minimize the external distractions without going overboard. And then make sure that place is comfortable and adequate. If there's a telephone in there, make sure you can unplug it for the time that you're going to meditate. Things like that. Anything that you might personally be psychologically conducive to better practice, do it. Create a little altar, or hang a Buddha image on the wall. Burn some incense if that helps. Whatever, just do everything you can and make this a focus. And then you start to think of this. This is your time. This time and this place, they've been set aside from the rest of the world. You've recovered this for you of your life. You have this, whatever it is, an hour a day or whatever. It's entirely for you. And revel in that. And take pleasure and satisfaction in that. And then stick to that practice. So that's the first step, is some kind of regularity. And I would suggest that you do try to set aside one day a week, like this Uposatha day observance, where you dedicate yourself, or a greater part of that day at least, if not all of it, at least a greater part of that, to doing more practice than usual. And that would be very helpful as well. So this will be the first step, is when you successfully are able to consistently do some practice over time. This will tremendously facilitate your overall success. And the other thing is that you'll find that you can carry your practice into a lot of other circumstances during the day. If you're doing the meditation on the sensations of the breath, there are many opportunities during the day when you can do that for a few minutes at a time, or for a short period. Depending on your circumstances, sometimes you have to wait in line at the store to check out. You might stand there for 2 or 3 minutes. Well, direct your attention to the sensations of your breath and just practice directing and sustaining your attention. Or maybe your work entails sometimes waiting for a photocopying job to be done. When you're standing there and the machine's chattering away, you don't have to be daydreaming. Take a few minutes, practice, observe your breath. But whatever the situation, so you'll find there are a lot of those times, and they make a difference. They may not seem like a big thing, but they make a difference. And we talked about practicing when you went to sleep at night, and when you wake up in the morning too. When you go to sleep at night, spend a little time meditating on your breath and observing the nature of dullness as you deliberately allow yourself to fall asleep. And when you wake up in the morning, especially if you're a person that when you wake up you're wide awake, you might just take an extra 5 minutes there to lay in bed and practice being mindful, being fully mindful of the sensations in your body and the sounds you hear and the process of waking up, and of course the breath. So all of these things, in one way or another, can help to reinforce your practice and increase your level of skill. And so take advantage of them. And then in your practice, you start to experience more introspective awareness, more of that kind of awareness of just what is going on in your mind at the present time. Well, practice doing that in your life as well. And of course, it's most difficult to practice that kind of introspective, mindful awareness in certain kind of, in the middle of an intense discussion with somebody. You probably have trouble doing it, or if you're trying to solve some difficult problem, you're not going to be able to do it then, But there are a lot of other times during the day where there's the space in your conscious awareness to be paying attention to what's going on in your mind. Just be watching your mind and how it reacts, noticing the mental states that you're in, and noticing the motivations behind the impulses that arise to do this or that. And do that more and more often. Do that as much as you can. And as your skill increases through your practice, there will be more and more situations in which you're able to do that. So that, to some degree, your practice can start to permeate all of your life. And so that time when you go and sit on the cushion, that's when you're able to intensify it. But it doesn't really stop when you get up. You just keep on doing it to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the circumstances you're in and how much distraction it creates. But you try to sustain that focused and mindful state of awareness as much as possible, with the objective of gaining insight into your own nature and to the nature of reality. And not something that requires a lot of analysis. It comes from just observing with an open, receptive, fully conscious mind. The insight will come. And that's where it comes from. It's just through ongoing, continued observation. So, and you'll find your own opportunities to practice in different ways, in different aspects, and do so. The direction to be successful, the direction you're going, is to move from the isolated context of sitting to the rest of your life. To allow your practice to become your life. And just keep that in mind. And always look for the opportunities that are there to make that so. Every situation that you're in provides opportunities. Even the most difficult and trying situations that you're in. It takes more skill in the more difficult situations. That's true. But regard them as opportunities, not as lost opportunities. Hopefully I made it really clear to you that there's tremendous benefit in always maintaining a positive perspective within your meditation practice. Whatever comes up, it's an opportunity to deal with that. It's not a problem. There are no bad meditations except for the ones where you give up and don't try. That's a bad meditation. You say, oh, I'm not up to this today. I only got 15 minutes left on the clock. I think I'll just daydream. No, that's a bad meditation. But nothing else is. It doesn't matter how much dullness or distraction or anything else. And also, in the rest of your life, it's not like, well, these meetings I go to are so intense. There's no way that that's an opportunity to carry mindfulness over into my life. I just can't do it then. Not true. It's not a lost opportunity. It's an opportunity. There are, even in those intense situations, there, especially if you make the effort, if you try, there's those opportunities to suddenly realize how you're reacting to what's going on. And to not only that, but see yourself in others and see others in yourself. Yes?
Yeah, I have been applying my meditation to the daily life for a while, but I have some confusion. Like, when you try to doing meditation in your daily life, you will find like you lose some pressure. Although you lose some the bad feeling, and you lose some pressure too. Like when you eat something, you try to feel the sensation, and you testing. When you testing, you lose like the pressure. Some food you test good before, but if you apply the meditation, you test well, that's just you feel it's just a test, and like if you listen some good music or something like it, but you know that's just a sound that hitting your ear, and you lose the pressure.
Well, I don't find that myself, and I'm trying to think why you would. Because let's talk about eating. Eating we all spend a lot of time eating, and eating is a tremendous opportunity to practice mindful awareness. It really is. But my experience of being fully mindful of eating is that I have a much greater appreciation for things that, if I'm not mindful, I totally lose them. The wonderful textures of the food and the aromas that I might not take the time to really notice, and the particular sensation as your teeth are biting through some vegetable or something like that. And when you take the time to be fully mindful, there are all of these different sensations that are, if anything, rather delightful. That's my experience. But you're not finding that. I'm wondering.
Yeah, I find that. I find that in the first stage.
Yeah.
And then you go in more deeper, you feel there's less difference. The good test and bad test, the difference range is much less, and then you don't feel that much pressure or that much bad testing before.
Yes?
I have a suspicion that maybe, like you were mentioning yesterday about analyzing down to the very detailed level of what actual perception is. I think maybe you're getting a little bit into this direction of this sort of philosophical or deconstructive analytical aspect of observing your sensations more so than full mindful awareness of those sensations, if that makes sense. It's sort of, I found that too, that the tendency to slip into this, well, it's only an electrical impulse and it's only a chemical reaction and so on and so forth, and to sort of devalue it. It's merely this or it's merely that, more so than attempting to be very mindful of what is as it is.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, is that it might be just a little bit too analytical and a little bit too intellectual. But I point out to you that one of the things to be noticing is the actual pleasantness or unpleasantness of the particular sensations, and the reaction of your mind to that pleasantness and unpleasantness. Now, what I do find in my own practice of mindfulness is, there does spontaneously develop a lot of equanimity in the sense that I don't find the arising of a compulsion because something tastes good, the arising of a compulsion to grasp onto that pleasure and want more, but rather the ability to just enjoy what is there, you know. So, whereas there is a kind of delight, and I'm not talking about you, but there's a kind of delight we take in our own craving and our own desire, you know, that sort of, you see somebody take a pint of ice cream and it's all gone, and you know that they weren't really, the satisfaction and enjoyment that they had was not coming from the taste of the ice cream so much as the delighting in their own craving, you know. And that does disappear. That does, you know, as equanimity develops, but it doesn't keep you from fully experiencing the pleasure of the sensation itself, you know. But anyway, perhaps if you just, you know, in these sorts of things, try paying a little more attention to the inherent pleasantness, unpleasantness of the experience itself, and observe the mind's response to that. Then and try that, and maybe next time I see you we can talk some more. Because as I say, my experience is actually that, and this may sound almost paradoxical, but the more equanimity there is towards a sensation, the greater the appreciation of the actual quality of pleasantness that is there. It's almost like as the grasping tendency of the mind gets out of the way, the appreciation can be there in a fuller sense. And the interesting thing too, and this is also relates to eating, because you know, in the mixture of flavors, not all of them are necessarily pleasant just in and of themselves. You know, we season our foods with things that certain seasoning adds a certain bitterness, but nevertheless we find that in the combination of the total experience, the mind reacts with a certain enjoyment to the bitterness, even though the bitterness by itself is not pleasant, you know, and things like that. So, yeah.
I would also like to share a personal experience that may have some relevance to Jesse's question. I spent many years in Chinese Buddhist circles, been to many Chinese temples, and the implicit or explicit messages I had received at these places have always been that pleasurable experiences or dangers are bad because they'll get you attached, and lying at the root of samsara is craving, and that so you need to crush your desire. And so there is also this prevalent confusion about the difference between equanimity and stoicism. There is this stereotypical image that many Chinese Buddhists have about how constraining your emotional responses or limiting the emotional range constitutes a kind of equanimity exercise. And when we're instructed to, quote-unquote, restrain our sense faculty, control our sense faculty, I realize that despite my best effort, because of this cultural conditioning, this doctrinal conditioning that I had received, I have been subtly resisting the reception of the full range of the experience and reacting to the more pleasurable aspects of the experience with fear, with this taboo-like mentality. And that may have played a role in the way I guess some Buddhists practice.
I think you might be right. When I reflect on my own experience, although I first started out being trained actually in a Vajrayana practice, I quickly became interested in the Theravada and explored that. And I did receive that from the Theravadan teachings, the things that I read and heard, very much that method that yes, pleasure is danger. It should, you should avoid taking pleasure. But then I also, in the process of trying to do that, discovered some things about it that didn't make sense to me. And then at some point or another came across the very clear statement that Vedana, the experience of pleasant and unpleasant, is not something that disappears with enlightenment, even the enlightenment of a Buddha. Buddha experienced both pain and pleasure, but Buddha did not experience the craving that arises in response to that. And I remember that that was very helpful to me to recognize that distinction. And of course that is the key distinction between Stoicism and equanimity. And equanimity is not in any sense any sort of not caring or not feeling or not experiencing the inherent qualities of experience. That's not what it means. It does mean equanimity is specifically the non-arising of the craving, the compulsion to have or to avoid, and the grasping on to something as being responsible for the pleasure or pain. There's the fullness of experience, but without the mental reactivity. And do you think that perhaps you may be conditioned somewhat by these
the
things?
Williams idea, I already aware of that for a long time, so I didn't fall into this category. I didn't fall into this category. I knew that for a long time. And probably I think it's more close to that what you say is because my deconstruction, I try to get into more detail and into the physical things. Like a batch testing and something, and then go so that I'm not that because I'm afraid of pressure or something. Because it's not only the pressure, the bad testing also feel less in the both end.
Yes.
So that's I think probably I analysis too deep into the physical things.
That would make sense. Yes. Well, that's good. I'm glad that this little discussion was helpful to you in pointing that out. And so then the answer would be to, in the process of your mindful awareness, be more mindful of the qualities of the experience itself and of the mind's reaction to it. Okay. Good. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. Do you suggest to be mostly vegetarian to do meditation?
Just to be
mostly vegetarian?
Mostly vegetarian? There are different points of view on that, which I think that fact in itself means that some people are more affected than others by the kind of diet that they have. And here I'm making a distinction between, on the one hand, as we begin to practice the Dharma more, we may feel that keeping the first precept against harming necessitates that we become a vegetarian, so that we're not consuming animals that have been killed so that we can eat them. But distinguishing that for just a question, and it's not just vegetarianism versus eating different kinds of flesh, but also some people say that when you meditate you shouldn't eat onions and garlic, or you shouldn't eat certain kind of spices and things like this. There's many different views on that. And what I would say is individual people are far more affected by these kinds of things than others. And so what you should do in terms of concerns like that is to try it out for yourself and make your own determination. The list of different, if I were to list all the different things that I've heard people say over time about what you should and shouldn't eat, if you want to have a good meditation, the list would be this long. You'd probably end up eating nothing but rice gruel and seaweed, I think. maybe that's on somebody's list.
Yeah, that was on the list.
That's on the list too. Okay.
No rice, by the way. You can't even have that.
Can't even have that. So at least in terms of the effect on your meditation, just try it both ways and see if you discern a difference. Because there are a lot of very powerful meditators and highly attained beings that do eat meat. Vegetarianism is it's not like an automatic thing. Some of the highest and most realized lamas that I've spent time with, given the opportunity to have roast pork versus vegetarian dish, have no hesitation in taking the roast pork. So, yes.
I have a question, but I have a quick comment first about the food and the equanimity. So I attend Buddhist classes at Shilai Temple.
Yes.
So I eat lunch there once or twice a week. And everything there is good.
Yes.
Pretty good. Except one dish. It's called bitter melon. All melon. Horrible. But I decided that the purpose of bitter melon is to make the other food taste better. But now my question.
Yes.
It's about meditating before bed.
Yes.
Okay. So regular practice would be for me to meditate in the morning, like you said.
Yes.
That's a given. But I'm not a great sleeper. I mean, I look for things that help me sleep. And so my normal practice would be to, before bed, sit on my mat and do some kind of short meditation session until I just feel drowsy. And then I kind of go off to bed versus lying in my bed and focusing on my breathing and watch the dullness happen. Is that kind of harmful? Because would that associate giving up and getting drowsy with the mat? Am I better off just going straight to bed and doing it there?
There is the risk of that. It's a possibility that you will establish an association in your mind of meditating with going to sleep. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen. So much depends upon the conscious formulation of intention, the determination that you make. And I do encourage people to meditate before they go to sleep. But if they have a very clear conscious awareness that this is not the same practice that they're doing when they're sitting on the cushion, it doesn't seem to create that kind of problem. But what I usually do, some people say, well, the only time of day that I can meditate is in the evening before I go to bed. And sometimes I'm tired, but that's the only time that I can do it. What I encourage them to do then is to not do that meditation in their bedroom. Do it somewhere else. As much as possible, condition their mind that even though this meditation is happening just before bedtime, it is not a time for the mind to go into dullness and to sleepiness. So where the danger comes with what you're doing is the intention is to help yourself go to sleep. And so the possibility is you may create that kind of conditioning. So what to do is to make sure that you don't sit on the same cushion in the same place that you usually do when you're trying to have normal meditation. Create the cues for your mind that identify this as a different context. And that should be enough. I will mention to you, though, that for many people who have difficulty going to sleep, it's often because they have difficulty shutting down the mind's thinking activities. And if that's the case with you, meditating on bodily sensations while you're in bed, you might find that is very helpful. And the longer you do that, you might find it becomes very easy. You go to bed, you put your full awareness into the sensations in your body, and you just observe those sensations, and the thinking process quiets down, and you go right to sleep.
So not here, but just the whole body.
Yeah, just your whole body. Just a gentle, partly scanning different areas, and partly just expansive awareness, so that you're aware of the whole body.
You missed out on our outdoor sleeping meditation last night, which many people find it very conducive to quick snoring. 10 minutes into our session, you're snoring or coming from different corners.
Yeah. Great. Yes.
I have a question about sleeping. Since I've been living in this mountain up there, I feel like I don't even want to sleep sometimes. I like being up and always, I don't know, I sleep like 4 or 5 hours and I feel like I'm done. I feel very, I'm never tired like that. And it just happens when I move into these hills up there where I live. You can feel this energy over there. When I live in LA, 8 hours were not enough. I started having to wake up early. So I can control my, I wake up I go to work at 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So I can sleep until 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, since I've been living in this mountain, 4:30 in the morning, I'm done. I wake up and I'm like, and I hear people over and over saying that you must sleep 8 hours, especially women. You should give that much rest. But I'm fine. I don't feel like I need more sleep.
No.
Why is that?
Well, we're all different. The amount of sleep we need varies, and it does vary with circumstances. I mean, I can't tell you why you need less sleep living where you do now compared to LA. I don't know the answer to that, but it's not the case that everybody always needs the same amount of sleep. And so, if you know what you need and you don't need more than 4 hours sleep where you're living, wonderful. That means you'll have no problem at all finding a lot of time to practice and things like that. So, and some people, this is their experience as they as they meditate, that they need less and less sleep. That was my experience for a long time. Now, because of certain health problems, I find I need more sleep. But as a result of my meditation for years there, I'd wake up quite early in the morning, and so I would just meditate, and I didn't seem to need that much sleep. So it is an important thing about a successful meditation practice is you do have to get enough rest. And there have been scientific studies that show that most people in this country do not get adequate rest, which can be measured by their actual physical performance of various kinds of tests that reveal fatigue, and also by certain changes in brain activity. It shows that most people in our society force themselves to function with less sleep than they need. So, to be a successful meditator, you should get the sleep that you need, however much that is, and you will most likely find the longer you practice that your need for sleep gradually decreases. But it's very important to get enough sleep. And if you're one of those people, I'm talking about making changes in your life if you want to have a successful practice, finding the time to practice, etc., etc. But one of the changes that you may need to make is to make an adjustment that allows you to get more sleep if you're not getting enough sleep. because it will be much harder when you do develop a sufficient degree of concentration that dullness starts to be a problem. If you're chronically not getting enough sleep, you're going to be combating that as well as the tendency to dullness, which is a part of the practice. Yeah.
On that, like, last night I just woke up a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
I slept okay at first.
Yeah.
So I was worried coming in here about this first meditation session. And it went very well for me. And my attitude toward it was that the meditation itself and feeling the breath can be very restful.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean it's like taking a nap.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're not supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you can look at it as restful.
Yeah.
And like if I'm in bed and I'm thinking, should I go another half hour here or get up and
Mm-hmm.
sit on my mat, I think that attitude of looking at it as restful is a good thing, right?
I agree with you, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I should probably, I'll take your question, and then I'm going to give you all a break. So I see a few people have already had to get up and slip out to the washroom, and so I can sit for a long time, and I know I can torture people that way, and I don't want to do that. Han?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about analytical meditation? You mentioned about yesterday, we
Mhm.
should separate regular meditation from analytical meditation. And is the practice helpful when you're making important decisions, especially for business
Mhm.
people?
You can use analytical meditation in many different ways, including these sort of life decisions that you have to make. It should be separate. Now, generally, what I do and what I would suggest you do, there is a procedure that you sit down and the intention is that you're going to do an analytical meditation. You might take 5 minutes or so of breath meditation to calm and focus your mind, just to get yourself into that focused and clear state, and then you let go of that. Now, the formal practice of an analytical meditation is that you take the subject that you wish to contemplate, and in your example, it may be a particular. You need to make a decision, but in the more classical situation of analytical meditation, it would probably be devoted to a deeper understanding of some Dharma issue. But it applies to anything. But I'll use these two examples. One would be you need to make a business decision. The other is that out of all of the different things that you've been studying and reading about, the question has arisen in your mind that in the Buddha's description of dependent origination, why does he place nama and rupa, name and form, the 5 aggregates, as the connecting link between consciousness and the 6 sense bases? And the other is the one is a business decision, and the other is this Dharma issue. Okay. What you would do in either case is you would sit down and you would have prepared yourself in whatever way is necessary. So you sit down, and the business decision is you begin to systematically review the different information that is relevant to the decision you have to make. Not evaluating it, but making sure that you have all the issues clear in your mind. And you might do this repeatedly. On the other hand, with the Dharma issue, there may be, you may take a paragraph that you read by an author that addresses this particular, and you may recollect in your mind exactly what he said. In either case, what you do is non-judgmentally, you keep reviewing this information until some aspect of it presents itself to you, speaks to you, so to speak. the analogy that's used in this, imagine you had a ball of thread which you wish to untangle. Then you would turn it and you would examine it until you discovered an end that was coming out, that you could begin the process. Or another analogy that is used is, imagine there is this building and it contains this wish-fulfilling gem which you wish to have. You would proceed to circumambulate the building and investigate, discover where the way is into it. And when you found the opening, you would proceed. So you review the information until something presents itself as the opening. And then you take that like the end of the thread and you begin to analytically pursue it and see where it takes you. And the assumption here is that you have developed a degree of concentration so that your mind's not going off to a lot of other things. If your mind doesn't go off to a lot of other things and stays on track, what you'll find is very quickly some things will begin to emerge from this analytical process in the form of conclusions or understandings or insights. I mean, this is in the ideal situation. And when that happens, and when you feel satisfied that something has emerged that has a significance to you, then the next stage is to take that and review the process by which it was arrived at so that it's firmly established in your mind. And then hold that conclusion that's now firmly established in your mind, and the path, the analytical path leading to it, is firmly established in it. So just hold that in your awareness and meditate on it and see if it sustains its meaning and significance. So this would be a 4-stage process of analytical meditation. With your Dharma problem, it would be the same thing. You pursue it, certain conclusions emerge, you review the process that led you to those conclusions so that it's clear, and then you just hold those conclusions in awareness and see if basically what you're doing is you're allowing the deeper processes of your mind by holding it there to see if there's any conflicts or anything else that arise associated with that. Sometimes what happens in analytical meditation is you don't come to the point of clear conclusions arising in the meditation. And so you stop and you go do something else. But then, at some time later, those conclusions may still emerge. Once you have set your mind to the task of analysis, it doesn't necessarily stop just when you get up and go do something else. But that is the formal process of analytical meditation. So let's take a break. Go to the washroom, stretch your legs, things like that.